Welcome and hello, everyone. Episode 5 of Second Look Sports. We're happy to be here with you. I'm Alex Mandarino. As always, I'm joined by Justin Arenburg, Brandon Brown, Sarah Matt behind the glass as our incredible producer, setting up a fantastic show for you. This week, second show of 2025. Exciting stuff so far. A lot of it's been dedicated specifically towards football, and we're going to kind of
Mhm.
dive into the wild card games and sort of what we expect moving forward. But how's everyone doing this week, Brando? I'll throw it over to you. How's the week been for you? You were actually at Scotiabank Arena Tuesday. I want to get into that, like covering some of the radio side of things. How was that, and how's the week going?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. First, I want to say thanks, guys, for having me back. Of course, I missed last week's show, but Sarah did a fantastic job stepping in. I was able to help a little bit behind the scenes and do some of the producing. So that was fantastic, and it was a great show. I was happy to listen in on Friday morning with the rest of our listeners. But yeah, you're right, Alex. On Tuesday night, I was at Leaf Stars for the fan the 590 with Sportsnet. It was great. Kind of just got to watch the producers there, the technical ops, and then of course got to meet and hang out and chat and watch the legends Joe Bowen and Jim Ralph do the radio call, which was fantastic. Of course, watched the game from the press box. Got to see kind of the process of how they go about doing the radio broadcast. So that was fantastic. But yeah, just been super busy and going through the trials and tribulations of this crazy industry these days. Now that we're all a part of it, but since the Christmas holiday, it's been great and been back to the grind and
Yeah.
have no complaints. So, but yeah, terrible loss for the Leafs, but on Tuesday. But other than that, it was a great experience, of course.
Must have been. Yeah, I was about to basically comment and say like a tough game to go to. I mean, of late, there hasn't been a great game, I'm sure, to go to for the Leafs. So either way, you probably would have had to go to a stinker, but that's cool. I was lucky enough to do that earlier this year with Armin and then shadowing him and Joe and Jim. And like those guys are, it's crazy to watch their process because you figure they have like all these screens set up, all of these like this technology. Joe has a sheet of paper with the names and numbers of everybody, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
you're
crazy.
right. It's very bare bones. They just kind of have like the one monitor and then they've got their notes and they just watch the game and they're reacting, right? And it's always a great conversation between Joe and Jim. So it was yeah, like you said, kind of eye-opening to see exactly what kind of goes on and yeah, definitely some surprises as the night went on.
Yeah, 100%. No, cool experience all around. Justin, how's your week been? Anything exciting from the internship or just anything that's kind of gone on over the past week for you?
Man, it's been I want to say a quieter week to be honest. Just been doing the web desk side of the internship right now.
Hmm.
Started that on Monday was my night first shift there. Web desk is a lot easier in terms of a process than Content Factory. I'll tell you that much. It's you're basically just staying in WordPress and the wire, so it's a lot easier to just like do one thing compared to Content Factory. You have to go one step, two step, three step, four step, five step. It's just like one step. That's all it takes.
Hmm.
But then yeah, man, it's just been a pretty quiet week. I think last week we went skating, I believe. That was pretty fun. Pretty fun. It was I don't even know what it was. It was like a figure eight type thing in outdoors
Hmm.
close to Humber in Etobicoke.
Oh yeah.
It's a lot of fun. But yeah, other than that, kind of slow week. Just been, you know, doing the internship, doing life, having fun.
There you go. When did you guys go to Nathan Phillips Square downtown to skate? Wasn't that recently too?
That was actually the first weekend in January, I believe.
Oh yeah.
After, yeah, it was after so you had New Year's Day on what, the Wednesday, I believe?
Yeah. Thursday. No, Wednesday. You're right. You're right. It's a
Wednesday,
Wednesday.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wednesday. So that weekend, I think is that Saturday is I think when we
Cool.
went.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. First time
Yeah.
I've ever gone skating there. It was a lot of fun. I really
Yeah.
wanted to get out the stick though and gloves and puck on that on but you can't, so that's unfortunate.
That is such a great like sheet of ice to do it. If actually so much so that the Leafs have practiced there in the past. Like
Yeah.
they have their outdoor practice. They actually announced that yesterday too. I know a few of us, I think Justin, you're probably on the same boat. Like you get those emails through our work email sometimes from different organizations. The Leafs are one of them. We were lucky
Yeah.
enough to see a press release basically that the Leafs would be playing. I don't think it's there. I think it's more in Etobicoke, if I'm not mistaken. I can't recall which rink, but they do an annual outdoor practice every year. A lot of the times they've had it at Nathan Phillips Square, which is pretty cool because it's right downtown and anybody
Yeah.
going to like the Eaton Center can just walk by and catch the practice. So exciting stuff. But I mean, I'm with you guys. It's sort of one of those weeks where you're sort of settled, getting ready. Like I've sort of gone and just gone, you know what, January, I'm going to keep things relaxed. Like the calendar on the fridge is pretty bare bones. Like I'm not going to get into anything crazy. I'm not going to buy a lot of things. Like a lot of the income has been spent on Christmas. I'm just going to kind of vibe and watch some sports and watch some things that aren't sports related. Sarah has a great question for us, and I'll pose it, Justin, back to you first. What is
Oh
something that
no.
you've watched this week that hasn't been sports related?
Listen, we've binge watched The Ranch. I don't know if you ever watched that show,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
The Ranch, I watched it before. I wanted to show it to Sarah, so I did, and turns out she likes it a lot. So we've been watching an episode here or there every day if we have time. But other than that, man, there's
Not
not a lot of
much.
there's not much that's not sports that goes
Is
on the
that
TV.
is that the show with Ashton Kutcher?
Yeah, Ashton Kutcher and Sam. Oh
Sam
no,
Elliott, right?
Sam
The older
Elliott.
guy.
Sam Elliott.
I have seen that show and I actually really enjoyed it. I think I watched the first season. I'm sure there's more now, but
Yeah, there's eight.
I thought it was kind of a different Ashton Kutcher character. I thought it was kind of fun. Very it has some clever jokes. So yeah, that's a good
Oh,
show.
it's a really, really funny show, and it's also like, um, it's not just like as
Yeah,
bad as what it sounds like. It's not a
yeah,
city show. It's more of a country show, so
absolutely.
it just fits the vibe.
That's
Cool.
cool. Brando.
I mean, for me, I haven't really been watching a lot of television or movies really, but one thing I have been focusing on outside of sports was just been kind of the news around North America. I mean, you got the wildfires happening down in LA. I know you guys
Yes.
have
Yeah.
mentioned those a little bit last week. Coverage has continued to kind of expand on what's been going on. Obviously, we've seen a ton of people lose their homes and some of their livelihood. But also up here in
Hmm.
Canada, I've been following a little bit of I'm not proud of it, some of the political action that's been
Yeah.
going on with specifically the Liberal Party. I don't know if you guys saw the potential new leader, Mark Carney, was on the Daily
Hmm.
Show with Jon Stewart. So I was able to catch some of that. Pretty good conversation. Definitely just an interesting time up here in the Great North. And I can't, whenever I see something new that might speak to me as a voter or potential, just a citizen of this country, I always got to try to peek in and see how it affects me and all of you guys as well. So
Yeah.
that's been something that's been on the top of my mind, but hopefully have some time in the next little bit to catch up on some actual entertaining stuff to watch. So I'll be definitely trying to do that this weekend.
Yeah. Informed citizen though. That's smart. I've
Yeah.
Right.
always, especially this past week, I have gotten a lot of push notifications on some of the candidates that have either decided, yes, I'm going to kind of put my name in the hat on the Liberal side, or I'm going to step away. And I just was like, okay, well, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of save that for when I have a
Yeah.
second. I'm just going to binge everything. And I haven't gotten to that point yet, but I think this weekend is going to call for like, yeah, you want to be locked into what's been going on. It's been sort of a crazy couple of weeks with Justin Trudeau stepping down. And so I think it's going to be an interesting like transition, and I'm kind of all for it to see what transitions next, right? Can't say that I'm really locked in right now, but that's on the docket. I haven't been following too much of that, but I have been watching a couple things. I started The Penguin with Olivia. Her and
Oh,
I have been watching that show. A lot of people have just kind of like recommended it to us. I'm not like a huge it's not that it's superhero, but I'm not huge into like the Marvel DC side of things. The Penguin isn't really that vibe at all. It's more just like a crime show. And Colin Farrell, when I told Olivia that the Penguin, if anyone has seen his character, it's a lot of like prosthetics and makeup, and he's got this big nose and he's like kind of half balding sort of thing. And so it doesn't look like Colin Farrell whatsoever. And when I mentioned that he was the actor that played the Penguin, she goes, hey, yeah, you're lying. Like, had to look it up and confirm it with me. So he does unreal. Though the actual mother from How I Met Your Mother, I think Christina Milioti is her name. She plays like the main crime daughter, like crime family daughter. She's pretty solid in it. So it's only been a couple episodes, but would recommend that show thus far. And on Saturday night, I got home from Leafs Talk and watched Gladiator, like the 2000 movie, like with Russell Crowe for the first time. So that was solid. Never seen that before. Sometimes I'm like a late movie watcher. It was like 11:30. I'm like, let's throw a 2.5 hour movie on. Like, you're 30 years old. You can get up early and battle. Didn't finish it, got to it later, but it was solid. So I can't complain. Would recommend that as well.
Well, you
You
can
can't
go
stay
see
up.
the
You
The
can't
second
stay up
one.
past 11 or what?
No, well, I got home. It was like 11:30, and I was like, okay, obviously I could go to bed. That could be a thing, but I'm not really. I'm like a night owl. Like, I'm someone who likes to stay up.
Oh,
It's been hard when you work like 9 a.m. sometimes. These shifts this week with editing for the fan, but I did not do that Sunday, and I was like, oh, it's just football on the docket, and we had our podcast for Second Look Hockey, so I had to be a little bit focused. But no, so I went to bed at like 2 in the morning. So I battle. I hang out.
well,
I
now you
hang
can watch
out.
the second one. I think you heard me say, Alex,
Yeah.
you get to watch Gladiator too. I've heard good things, so I can't fault you for that. Well, the first one is a classic, so good pick, good pick.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. We'll get into some sports talk now for everyone that's banging their hands on their desk, waiting for something sports related here. But love to catch up with you guys. So obviously the biggest story was wild card weekend this past Saturday and Sunday. NFL, they did drop the super wild card weekend. So I didn't see any super, unfortunately, going around. They introduced the super wild card weekend when I think they added that third wild card team in each conference in 2020. To be fair, I don't think it deserved the title of Super Wild Card Weekend. I thought it was a horrible weekend of football all around. I'm going to be completely honest, but we can get into the nuances of it right now. So we'll start on the NFC side. So in terms of like chronological order, I guess the first game was was the Philadelphia Eagles and Green Bay Packers. So Philadelphia 22 over the Packers 10. Washington Commanders and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers got the night game. The Commanders prevailed 23-20 there. And then the LA Rams 27 over the Minnesota Vikings 9 on Monday night. Sort of the prime game on Monday. Before we get into any questions, like, were there any storylines or any notes from those three games that you sort of wanted to get into? Brandon, I'll go to you first for this one.
I mean, yeah, I think for me the biggest storyline was the Commanders. The Bucks and the Commanders. I think most people saw that as maybe the most competitive game of the weekend. Looking ahead, kind of that interesting question about what Jaden Daniels was going to do. That rookie and hadn't been a rookie quarterback win in a little bit. So I think people were excited for that game, and it delivered. It was the game that went down to the wire, the most in terms of the weekend overall, and yeah, a few little mistakes probably cost the Bucks a chance to move on to the divisional round. But I'd say that game really was for me the most exciting and definitely provided the most entertainment value. And I think the Commanders continue to be a fun team as we move into the divisional round. And I'm sure they'll be a team that people continue to kind of rally around, especially if you're in the Washington, DC area. It's been a little bit since they've had a more competitive team, since maybe like RG3 was around when they were in the playoffs when he was a rookie. So I think that game for me was kind of the standout of the three NFC games for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. That was actually the only game that ended in a one-score victory.
Yeah.
Everything
Yeah.
else was 2 or 3, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Justin, you wanted to chime in on that though too.
I think more so it was the Eagles game that was a headline to me, only because it made me a little bit worried for this weekend for them going into a matchup, only because we have Jalen Hurts who still looked concussed while playing that game. He didn't look great. He got the job done. He got done what he needed to get done, but like he just didn't flash, and that's gonna be important for this weekend at least, because the rest of the team looks good. And it's enough to get them by a wild card round where they're playing the Packers. But in terms of the overall play by Jalen Hurts, that kind of scared me. But overall, like, and it's hard to say, like, oh, the Eagles didn't have a great game. If Saquon, instead of just taking a knee, which was smart to do, goes and runs it in for a touchdown, that's a three score game as well, 29-10. So we're looking at it in a totally different light. It's just that the Eagles looked like a little bit slow offensively, especially in the first half.
Mm. I think that's fair to say. And it was one of those games where you mentioned the idea of the score sort of not really like telling the narrative of the game. I think that was probably the case for a few different games. And just to sort of round things out, I'll touch on the Monday night game in the Rams Vikings, which probably was the one that rightfully so deserved a lot of the headlines outside of the fact of the doink with Washington, which Washington has had some really weird ending to games this year. If you even go back to like their victory over the Bears, and this doink kind of proves that that's just another not lucky bounce because it was obviously a
No,
successful
it's
win,
luck.
but one of those.
It's luck.
It's luck, but because obviously if the Bears, it would have doinked off all three, and then it would have fallen out. But ultimately, with the way that the season's gone, I'm happy to see Washington move on. There was that stat going around. It's old now where I think, what is it, 2005, 2006, where the Commanders, or I guess the Washington team, had won won the playoff game. They haven't won a playoff game since. And Alex
Yeah.
Ovechkin has scored 848 goals in between both playoff
Yeah.
wins for the Commanders and whatever. Unreal. All that to say, the Monday night game, I don't think you look at the score, it's obviously a drumming for the Rams, 27-9, but I feel like that game could have been so much worse based on the play of both teams. The defense early on for Minnesota, which has been so successful all season under Brian Flores, just didn't seem to find an answer for Stafford, and specifically like a Puka Nacua. Cooper Kupp, I don't think, had a catch in the first half. So he wasn't even really relevant until he made one of those bigger yard plays halfway through the third quarter, I believe it
Yeah.
was.
And he was
And then
spinning his
obviously the
body on that
biggest,
one.
definitely, he had that great play, and I was like,
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like he
go
spun his
ahead.
whole body around, and just like the way he was able to corral that one in, like, it was crazy, man.
Oh,
Like, he's so dangerous, right? Like, he just, like, yeah, he might not have a catch in the first half, but you doesn't mean you just can, like, go in zone and just let him cook in the inside. Like, that's not how Cooper Cup's gonna work.
no. I heard someone at the office, not in our department, I think, suggest a bet. One of the lines for Cooper Cup, one of the prop bets was receptions over under 3.5. And I was like, I think the under with Cooper Cup, just because of the offense that the Rams have sort of displayed of late. And going into the game, and like after the second half, he hadn't had a catch yet. And I was like, oh, well, obviously my mindset was probably correct in that sense. He made that one catch. I actually don't know what he ended up with, but that was such a defining play that kind of pushed the game forward. But really, the storyline is obviously Sam Darnold, right? Like, was he sacked 7 times? Incredibly, just like
9.
the Sam Darnold
I think it
of
was
old.
9. Yeah,
Nine
just on
times,
that. Yeah.
9 is what he ended
Even
up with.
more. Yeah,
I think
even
at one
crazier.
point,
A lot of them
crazier.
were on
I
him,
know at
though.
some point it was 7. No,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. Like, we can get into his performance. Like, what did you guys think? And is he worthy of extension, or what does that kind of mean for his future moving forward here?
If you want
Go
to take
ahead,
this
Justin.
one, Brandon, right now, I was just looking up
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me.
his Cooper Cup. Cooper Cup had 1 reception. That's all he had in the game.
Mm.
So you were right.
So is that one reception? Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to say Minnesota needs to franchise tag him. It's probably the smartest
Mm.
move to do. Um, Only because I saw reports yesterday that he's still gonna demand 30 plus million. Like, he's gonna get offers of 30 plus million in free agency. So it'd be smart to just franchise tag him and then just trade him, in my opinion. Who else are you going to use your franchise tag on this year if you're the Minnesota
Yeah.
Vikings? So just franchise tag him, let him, like, just hold him, and maybe you trade him to Pittsburgh, maybe you trade him to the Jets, maybe you trade him somewhere else. But, like, teams will be desperate for Sam Darnold. And just because he had 2 bad games, they only lost to the Viking or to the Rams and the Lions this season, both on back-to-back weeks. They won all 14 other games. I think if you look at his last 2 games, that wouldn't be a complete evaluation of his season, and that wouldn't be fair to him because he played great football. The one thing he wasn't doing and he doesn't do is what Troy Aikman said on the broadcast is he needs to see it to throw it. And he doesn't like he
Mm.
just doesn't throw it in anticipation that the receiver is gonna be there. Like he just doesn't throw it where an open window might be. He needs to see the person open to throw it, and that is something that is always gonna derail his potential, in my opinion, because a lot of these quarterbacks, a lot of the great ones, you think of Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, they throw into open field where they expect their wide receiver to get to. They don't just throw to an open
Mhm.
receiver, they actually throw to where they expect them to go. So that's something that I think is going to hurt Sam Darnold going forward. But overall, if you're Sam Darnold, you have to be so pleased with this season. Like you resurrected your career. Like think about that. Like he was a complete bust. And goes to San Fran or goes to Carolina first after New York, then goes to San Fran, sits behind Kyle Shanahan, learns that mind. Then he goes to Kevin O'Connell and learns that offensive line or offensive mind and actually, uses everything he's been taught over the last and sitting behind guys for the last couple of years to prove that he's still a good quarterback in this league. Yeah, I think a payday is coming for him. I just think it'd be smart for the Vikings to franchise tag him.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with some of what you're saying, Justin. I think in regards to the game, I think you mentioned it early that he was just hanging onto the ball way too long, not allowing his skill position players to make a play on the ball. He was deciding, I'm going to hold on to this and I'm not going to
Yeah.
allow an interception and incompletion. Oftentimes, he was not throwing the ball away when they still had opportunities to score, and he was taking sacks way too far back. I think on a fourth down play, he took a sack. It's like you just can't do
Yeah.
that. So
Mhm.
for me, I don't think that he necessarily lost. You know, say if he was going to make 30 million next year, I don't think he lost 50% of that, but I would be a little surprised to see the Vikings franchise tag him only because of just the way that the NFL works these days. They've got their guy in the wings. He sat behind Darnold for a year. He was going to be the starter in JJ McCarthy when the year began if it wasn't for his year-long injury. So I would expect them to continue and stay the course and continue to move forward with McCarthy. Maybe they keep Darnold around as like a 1A or
But
a 1B situation,
not
but I would be surprised to see them pay him in that regard just because they don't have to.
but I don't think
So
it's more
yeah.
so like paying him. I think it's more so like a franchise tagging him for the reason of then a team can trade for him. And you
If
don't
they know that there's a deal out there and they can move forward on that with through the tag, I'm not sure exactly the process. I'm sure you'd have to negotiate probably before you tag, or I guess there's non-exclusive tags now. There's a whole situation where they could trade him, but I don't think they
Yeah.
would do that unless they knew that they had a deal in place, because it's just too much of a risk and you don't spend that kind of money without having a secure plan. So maybe they have that plan in place and I'm just kind of on the other side of it, but to me, it feels like they're going to kind of move on from this era, especially the kind of the way that it ended. I could see if they won a playoff game, they move on, and maybe it's a close, divisional or something or whatever. But I feel like just kind of that sour taste at the end maybe just gives them some pause for bringing him back. And I'm sure there will be teams that want to bring him in and give him an opportunity to try to, again, kind of replicate the season that he had. But maybe it's just the way that it ended for me that it just kind of gives that like that again that sour taste of I don't really know what other teams are thinking or even what the Vikings are thinking. You watch Kevin O'Connell on the sidelines during that game, and he's like a lot of his
yeah.
body language and his facial gestures and
Yeah.
everything, it just doesn't look good at all. And obviously, he probably had aspirations to go deep in the playoffs, even with Darnold. So yeah, it's just going to be an interesting situation. I think one to watch for sure. And, other teams will be, I'm sure, monitoring that as we get closer to the off season for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing you mentioned it, Brandon, is just like, as much as it's been a great season and objectively speaking, it was an awesome season for Sam Darnold. You look at guys like Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield who have turned their careers around based on second or third chances. And Sam Darnold fits the same narrative. but a couple things. It is the NFL of what have you done for me lately league, and lately has been horrendous. Against the Lions and against the Rams, he's just looked lost, and he looks like the pressure has gotten to him in back-to-back weeks. It isn't necessarily a microcosm of the entire season, but it just doesn't look good from a recency bias perspective. When 2 or 3 weeks ago, everyone was saying, how much money are the Vikings going to offload for Sam Darnold to stay in the wings? So it's just such a crazy transition. And like you said, with Kevin O'Connell, I can't recall the exact post-game comments that he made, but he said something along the lines of like, yep, like I'll just cherish the days with Sam and like really happy with how the season went, basically putting a bow on a great first 95% of the season and saying, yeah, sorry, pal, you're out the door. Like it's time to kind of transition. But with the amount of teams that are in the league now looking for quarterbacks, I can think of, yes, some teams at the top of the draft class in guys like Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders, even, I mean, Ewers is going back, I think, to Texas, so I don't think he would count.
No,
Plus, he hasn't
he
had a great
declared
end of the season.
yesterday.
But did he declare yesterday? Okay,
Yeah,
so
he declared yesterday.
I know there was things kind of on waiting whether he was going to go back or not, but there isn't necessarily the best draft class in history. And you have teams that aren't necessarily at the complete top of the draft that are going to draft quarterbacks like the Giants and Titans are. You have guys like teams like the Jets. You have teams that are like the Raiders that maybe they reach, maybe they don't. But there are teams that would definitely take Sam Darnold. The question really is, was he good because of the offensive schemes that Kevin O'Connell was putting together, or under the offensive mind of Kevin O'Connell, and will he be able to replicate that? Or is it a case of he's just good and he's going to be successful anywhere? Or, you see, okay, he's done and he's got to move on, and it's just a product of a great environment. We don't know. But before we transition, I think we should get into some of the games that we're upcoming from the NFC this coming weekend for the divisional round. So firstly, on Saturday, 8 o'clock, Commanders are going to Detroit to take on the Lions. Lions are 9.5-point favorites. Or sorry, just nine. They're nine favorites still. Unbelievable. Who do you guys have for this game? Justin, let's go to you. What do you think is going to happen here?
I think Washington will come into Detroit and kind of shock them in terms of how much of a fight they're going to put up. Overall, though, I think the Detroit Lions will prevail and will go to the NFC Championship. I do think, though, Jaden Daniels is going to have another great rookie quarterback playoff game.
I like that. Brandon.
Yeah, I don't disagree that the Commanders will come in and they will, I think, show people again that they are, legitimate, playoff team, and that they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. That being said, I think the Lions, will come out on top. The 9-point spread seems like a lot, but we've seen some of those big spreads in the wildcard round, and a lot of them panned out. You got the Ravens, the Bills, they were expected to win pretty big, so I think that could continue. But I mean, the bye, coming off a bye, you never know. Russ versus Russ. What's that first quarter, first half going to look like for the Lions? But I'm pretty confident that no matter what happens there, their offense should be able to pull it together at some point and score enough points to put them over the hump or over the Commanders at least. So, but yeah, I mean, you never know in these kind of situations. Maybe the Commanders have found this momentum and are just going to kind of ride that through. But it would be a shock, I think, if the Commanders were to beat the Lions this weekend.
Agreed. You guys hit the nail on the head. There's not much else to say other than it would be such a Lions thing to lose this game. But Lions of the past,
True.
under Dan Campbell, and with some of the defense coming back, Alex Anzalone being one of the main guys on that defensive side of things, like I think the Detroit Lions completely dominate here. The Commanders are playing with house money. They've had a great season. I think it's been successful on all fronts, but I do think with the rest that they've had, with Dan Campbell and the team probably chomping at the bit to get playing, I think they're going to be in their environment. Clearly, I think they're going to dominate, and I think that they definitely hit over 9 points for the Commanders. We'll transition to the Rams going to the Link in Philadelphia Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Eagles are 6-point favorites. Do we think the Lambs, maybe the Lambs have a chance? The Rams probably don't, but what do the Rams' chances look like going into the Eagles' den? Let's go to you, Brandon, for this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Rams have a pretty good shot at taking out the Eagles.
Okay.
Even in Philadelphia, you look at the way that the Rams defense played against the Vikings. If they can kind of replicate some of that, especially at the line, the Eagles, I would say, have a superior offensive line to what the Vikings had. So I would expect Jalen Hurts to have a little bit more time and space to maybe to play with the ball. Of course, he moves a lot more than Sam Darnold as well, so that could create options or difficulties for the Rams. But the way the Rams have been playing, I almost feel like if I go against them, they're going to go against me and they're going to win. But I think that Philadelphia is the better team, and I expect them to eke out a close one. The Rams. For me, the biggest thing might be that this game is in Philadelphia in the elements, depending on what the weather looks like. Because the Rams are, they're a warm climate team. They just played in a dome in Arizona, so they're going to be they're not, I'm sure they'll be out practicing in the elements this week, but it's hard pressed to go into a northern city, and especially when you're from a southern climate, and come in and
Yeah.
be ready for those conditions. So that might be the hardest thing for the Rams, but I think we got a close one here. But I'm going to take the Eagles by 2 points, 3 points. It might come down to the last play. Yeah.
I think
Wow. Okay. Justin.
I think you got to think about the Rams and how dangerous they are coming into this game. They have to be the most dangerous team coming into the divisional round.
Definitely.
The fact that Sean McVay decided, hey, we're not going to go and try and get a better seed. We're going to rest our guys in week 18. That made me scared from the get-go, because that means that Sean McVay knows in his head he's got a plan dialed up and he's fine to go. He's ready to go. And hey, Matthew Stafford looked like absolute crap going down the rest of the season. Looked absolutely terrible. Well, in that wild card game, he looked phenomenal. He looked like he was like Matthew Stafford of a few years ago when they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna get that this weekend, also backwards hat Matt, like that's the aura there. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like
Fire
just
me
when he was
up.
doing his interview, I was just thinking frat boy Matt the whole time. But yeah, if you're gonna get that kind of Matt this weekend, watch out. I think the Rams are dangerous and they could sneak out of the link with a win.
Yeah. Matt Stafford reminds me of the guy who wears like puka shells and like a pink Abercrombie and Fitch polo with like the collar popped completely. And like one of the guys that's just at the beach constantly. And hey, if you're in LA, why not? But in a good way. And yeah, he looked so poised. And you know what? Like big game Matt came out. That's not a nickname, but it's a nickname for him now that I'm going to give him for this 1 or 2 minute preview specifically. Sean McVay is unbelievable. The guy has an answer for everything. He looks so anxious all the time. Like he has to have, of all the coaches in the NFL, the most steps per game on average. 100%. That guy's never standing still. But ultimately, I feel like his brain is just weighing him down. So he kind of has to move around so it doesn't pull him over, because he's such a smart coach. And he's still very young in terms of his coaching history, and obviously a part of a couple of great branches of coaches. I think Philly takes this simply because I do think they have the most talent for every position on the field. At home, that place is a dominant place to play when you're the Eagles. But I wonder if this is going to just be an out coaching match for Sean McVay over Nick Sirianni, who's had a good season, despite some of the drama that kind of has involved him over the past few games, mainly when he was yelling at fans. And, Philly is obviously really particular in terms of how they want their sports teams to play. Saquon's a monster. Unless Jalen Hurts is injured or isn't his full self, I can see the Eagles easily taking this. But it's going to be probably the second best match outside of the one that we'll tee up later with the Bills and Ravens. I'm excited to see this game. I'm surprised sort of that it's at 3 p.m., but obviously the game at 6:30, which is the Bills and Ravens, takes the cake. So I still think the Eagles take it, but I agree in that it'll be closer, and I think the Rams cover the spread. So we'll see how that goes. We're going to head to the AFC shortly. We'll take a quick break, see how the AFC did this past wildcard weekend, and kind of tee up the divisional round next. And we're back. Thanks for joining us. If you missed the first half, we did touch on the NFC Second Look Sports episode 5. We're going to move on to the AFC wildcard games. Just to sort of recap, if you missed the scores, first game, Houston Texans 32 over the LA Chargers 12. The Baltimore Ravens dismantled pretty much the division rival Pittsburgh Steelers 28-14 Saturday night. And then the Buffalo Bills 31 over the Denver Broncos in the 7th seed with 7 points. We don't need to touch on too much of these games. I did just want to carve out a second to talk about Justin Herbert. I'm an LA Chargers fan, and I think Herbert, of all people, has gotten a lot of flack and hate for the way that he performed on Saturday for Houston Texans drumming of my Chargers. So I want to start by saying I feel like the easy thing to do in this situation is to hate on Justin Herbert because he's played 2 playoff games. The first one a handful of years ago was blowing the lead to the Jaguars when they were up, 28-3 at the half, something along those lines. And then obviously his performance against the Houston Texans this week.
27
It was not good.
27
nothing, right? Obviously not much better, if anything worse, because it was 27 over 25 points. That wasn't ideal. I think that loss is more on Brendan Staley completely collapsing. This performance was partially on Justin Herbert. I don't think he gets away with a lot of what people are kind of making up as excuses for the loss. But ultimately, when you look at it from a scale, the season for the Chargers was a success. They were 5-12 last year. They ended 11-6 this year under Jim Harbaugh. And he's completely changed the culture around the team. And he has Justin Herbert as his guy. And the way Justin Herbert performed throughout the entire season with the weapons that he had, i.e. Ladd McConkey as their, second round draft pick, late first round draft pick, for wide receiver, playing his rookie season, having a pretty phenomenal season for the most part. And that was mainly their weapon for this year. You have Quentin Johnson, Joshua Palmer, Will Disley at tight end, technically Hayden Hurst as backup tight end. That's not good enough to get it done if you're going to be a playoff and Super Bowl contender. And that really showed in the way that the Chargers played this game. Ladd McConkey got force-fed most of the time, and the Houston defense, Kamari Lassiter specifically, I think he was teammates with Ladd McConkey when they were at Georgia, and Ladd McConkey has suggested that he's the most difficult defensive player he's ever played against. So Houston Texans, they obviously credit to them for having such a successful defense and putting the Chargers in the spin zone there. But really, when you look at it, Herbert obviously did not perform well. 4 interceptions to his 3 for the entire season. So a lot of it could be placed on him, but I don't think people spinning the narrative that he's a bad quarterback, he's not good in playoff performances. Look at the team around him. Look at the way that the Houston defense performed. They were able to sort of shut everything down. And although there was situations where I think Herbert panicked or didn't necessarily have his greatest game and didn't make the best decisions and kind of forced the ball out of his hands, what else are you going to do when you have nobody to catch the ball? So I want to give him a little bit less credit for the loss than I think a lot of people are giving him. I still believe in him as an incredible quarterback. Is he top 5? I don't know. Maybe top 10 for sure, possibly top 7. But all that to say, I still think I believe in him. And I think it's just one of those seasons. So
Listen,
that's what I have to say with the Chargers.
He completed, outside of Ladd McConkey, how many passes do you think he completed to wide receivers on Saturday?
Well, I think he completed 1.
No, he completed 2.
Wow. Double the amount.
And he completed 9 to Ladd McConkey. You're right.
Yeah.
They just need more weapons around him. I do think it was a smart decision to draft Joe Alt, though, in this last year's draft.
Yep.
And who'd be really good? Because you could go throw the bag at T. Higgins if you really wanted to. I don't think he'd go there. I think he's going to the Patriots, but that's a different story.
That's for another day.
I think if it was me and if I knew Jim Harbaugh, which I don't, but I do know what his tendencies are, and that is to run the ball. And I would say Genty would be the number 1 target in the draft for the Chargers, just because J.K. Dobbins was good this year, but you can't really rely on his health as he gets up on age. So if you had that pair in the backfield, holy, that would just be like Sonic and Knuckles over there in Detroit.
I don't hate it. I think a lot of people have Genty going to the Cowboys because he's such like a Cowboys
Yeah.
type pick. I'll be honest, I would love the Chargers to take Tyler Warren out of Penn State, the tight end. Like he's a very dynamic pass catcher. And Penn State didn't really have a lot of wide receivers to throw to this year, from my understanding. I'm not going to be the college guru. I don't know it that
No, they
well. This is
did.
just based
They
on
didn't.
takes,
No, they
right?
didn't. They had no
Um,
one.
but Tyler Warren was able to make some incredible plays. And so I think he's a great tight end. It's a weird place to start at tight end rather than bolstering your receiver core. But that being said, he was dominant. And I think you see the way Brock Bowers performed for the Raiders this year. And I feel like a similar situation could be of substance in
Well,
the Chargers
Penn
game.
State and the Chargers are basically the same. Like
Yeah.
they went further than what people thought, and they had absolutely no wide receivers
Yeah.
outside of one guy. One
Yeah.
guy. That's all they have. And you can't just like force feed the one guy because everyone knows where the ball's going. Like it's a really hard state.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay. We'll move on. We'll move on. We'll hope for I will hope for the Chargers moving forward. I feel like they're in good hands if they get a wide receiver core. Look, the rest of the games here were just domination. There wasn't really much to it. I don't know if we have too much to dive into. We can just sort of look ahead and touch on some of the games this weekend from the AFC. The first is the Houston Texans visiting Arrowhead and the Kansas City Chiefs. That's Saturday at 4:30. Chiefs are 8-point favorites. I'm surprised it's not more, just because the Chiefs are the Chiefs. Is there any way that the Texans win this game? Justin, let's go to you first. Just like thoughts on this game
Yeah, of
briefly.
course there's a way they can win. Like they
And
just beat the
Patrick Mahomes
Chargers.
is just injured.
No, I think this is not anywhere near bad as saying Mackenzie Blackwood could be a Vezina Trophy candidate.
He is. He's not
No,
going to
he's
win. He'll
not.
be a candidate.
No, he won't.
Let's see what
No, he
happens.
won't. All I'm saying is that the Texans will be live in this game. They won't win. I don't think they're gonna win, but I don't think it's gonna be a massive blowout that we've seen. Like let's just really think about what they have. They still have Nico Collins on offense. They
Mm-hmm.
still have Joe Mixon. Their defense looked insane last week. Derek Stingley Jr. is an incredible cornerback.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and Will Anderson up front is very, very good as well. Like, I just think if we're gonna count out the Texans this quickly, like, and to do so in a divisional round would be wrong because like they obviously just smacked the Chargers. No
Mm-hmm.
one was even expecting them to win that game. The Chargers were favorites. That's why
Yeah.
this thing on the Chargers stinks a little bit more because the Chargers were favorites to win that game. So the Texans actually surprising everyone, showing up with their defense on last week, surprised everyone, and now we're looking at a situation where going up against the Chiefs, you have to think that that defense is going to come out with that same effort and same game plan again this weekend.
Yeah. Fair enough. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that it will be a closer game than most people would anticipate. Perhaps I think a key thing for Houston will be if they can't get out to an early lead, they will have to keep it close. They can't fall behind early and allow Andy Reid and the Chiefs to, send pressure on defense and continue to kind of, run the clock and be able to play their, Kansas City has this very specific style of play. They like to go short passes. They like to, like I said, keep the clock moving. They like to take small chunks of the field in order to score points. They're not going to go out and play like Houston and throw bombs down the field all the time, but they can do that. So I think it will kind of depend on how well Kansas City's offense plays. I expect their defense to play very well. It could be one of those, in 17-10 type games where it comes down to the final play and whoever has the ball at the end, most of the time it's Patrick Mahomes. But I expect Kansas City to kind of go through the motions and do what they do in the divisional round, which is kind of secure up spots that they need to tighten up and really prepare themselves for the deeper runs, so that they're going to be looking ahead, hopefully not too much that they, don't look past the Texans, but I think they'll be, fully prepared with the bye, and they appear to be healthy. I think that there's just not much that goes the Texans' way. As you're looking ahead at this game, once you get it on the field, anything can happen. But I think you'd be hard pressed to take the Texans in a pick 'em type of bet. So I think I'll roll with the Chiefs until we see them potentially face off against this Baltimore or Buffalo team, whoever comes out on top in the other game as we get there. But for me, until the Chiefs lose, it's hard to see. What are they, 6-0 in the divisional round with Mahomes? So I think,
Yeah, they're never
Yeah.
not made into the AFC Championship game, which
until
I
they
don't think
lose, I think
credibility itself.
I think I'll roll with them until they lose, and then it's like, hey, you kind of got to reevaluate at that point, right? So I think,
Yeah.
the Chiefs, they look good, and they look poised to continue moving on, I think.
I see nothing wrong with that, with either take. I do think that, I mean, I'm of the mind that if your team loses in the playoffs, you'd rather have the team that beat you win. Because then you could be like a loser take of being like, oh, well, they won. So obviously, like, it wasn't that big of a deal.
We lost to the
Also-
best team, right? That's what you can
Exactly.
say. Yeah.
So
Also,
I would
CJ
like
Stroud
Sorry?
CJ Stroud has as many playoff wins as Dak Prescott does already in his career.
Yeah. I saw so many memes online of I don't know who was it. It was Sam Darnold, and like the meme of like he's in the top left corner and then he's transitioning every corner of the meme into Dak Prescott, like Sam Darnold in big playoff games. So yeah, I can see that.
But he also CJ Stroud in his second year has more wins than Tua, has more wins than Trevor Lawrence. Like
Yeah.
CJ Stroud has already proved that he's a winner. Like he didn't have the best, he had a sophomore slump, but he still was really good. And I think that's something to look at this weekend as well, is
Yeah.
how he carries himself into this game.
That's a really fair point, because I don't think CJ Stroud got a lot of credit for this win. I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, he's CJ Stroud of last year in this game," but a lot of the credit went to the defense for Houston against the Chargers. And you know what? CJ Stroud deserves a lot of credit. That third down where the ball was fumbled and he scrambled and made that 20+ yard pass, changed the game, changed the narrative. And so that could happen here. I still think Kansas City takes it easily. I just think with 25 days of rest for Kansas City, mainly the main starters, Kelsey, Mahomes, those guys, like probably Chris Jones too. But like all that to say, I think Houston has a chance, but I still think that the Chiefs take them down pretty easily. That being said, boys, I think the biggest narrative here is the 6:30 game. Baltimore heads to the Buffalo Bills Stadium on Sunday evening, 6:30. Ravens are actually 1-point favorites, which is really interesting in this one.
That's
so
crazy.
It is very crazy.
That's insane.
What do we think? I have a narrative question on this game, but we'll just touch on the game specifically. Brandon, let's go to you first. How do you think this one plays out?
Yeah, I mean, you guys are talking about the spread. I actually don't think it's that crazy. Typically you get about 3 points for being the home team. So hypothetically, you're looking at the Ravens, -4 or whatever. If that was, say it was a neutral zone. I think the Ravens beat the Bills like 35-10. What was it, week 4?
Yeah,
I think
week 4. Week
yes,
4.
that's true. But that you can only go by what you've seen, right? And I know obviously there's not a lot that to me separates these two teams in terms of obviously their offensive ability, and both their defenses have been, throughout the course of the whole season, have had, stretches where they've been suspect as well. But all that being said, I'm going to take the Ravens in this one. I hate to do it. I'm a Bills guy. Been cheering for the Bills the entire season. Of course, I'd love to see them win, and if they would, I'd gladly eat my own words, because the Bills deserve it just as much as any other team. But the way that I watch this Ravens offense specifically, the Bills struggle with, or had struggled. They played great last week against the run, but they've struggled with the run throughout the course of the season. And I think the way that the Baltimore Ravens can run the ball, not only obviously with Derrick Henry, one of the biggest, strongest backs in the NFL, but they have maybe the most dangerous on his feet in terms of a quarterback in Lamar Jackson as well. So I think it will come down to how the Ravens decide to play this game. We've seen them in the past kind of get away from some of their game plans in playoff games. And if they are to, really, if this game stays tight and the Bills play, strong defensive game, which I hope is the case, maybe we see Lamar have to try to throw the ball a little bit more than he's expecting, or maybe the Bills can, stuff that box and hope that it takes the ball out of Derrick Henry's hands and gives them a chance that way. Because I think the Bills can score and they're going to put up points against this Ravens defense. But it's can they stop Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry? And obviously, I believe Zay Flowers is still going to be out, but they've got some weapons as well still. And I think it just will come down to that Buffalo defense. And if they can really, strengthen themselves to a point where they can get some stops and give Josh Allen a chance at the end of the game to win, because I don't think anybody is going to bet that this game's going to be a blowout one way or the other. I think everyone expects it to be, a standard, exciting playoff game where both teams are going at it. And like I said, if it's whether it's a turnover or just a great play towards the end of the fourth quarter, I think that's what it will come down to. And I hope it's the Bills that make that play. But the way that I've been watching this Ravens team and just the way that I see them as a legitimate Super Bowl contender, I think they have almost all the pieces to put it together, and it will just come down to that, those final few minutes or whatever game-changing play happens. But yeah, that's the way I'm leading right now.
Did you see what the temperature is supposed to be for this game on Sunday
It's supposed to
night?
be very, very cold, right? Like below freezing, I think.
Yeah, -14.
Yeah.
Who do you think that favors?
I mean, I think
Probably the Bills.
It does favor the Bills in that they are, that's their home field. They play in that environment. Maybe it's a little bit colder, I'd say, there, obviously in Buffalo, than probably down in, I think it's in Maryland or wherever the Baltimore Ravens play. But the Ravens they're an outdoor team. They're a northeastern team. Like, I wouldn't say they're going to go into that stadium and be completely, surprised by the elements. I think they'll be ready for it. But I think the Bills just have maybe a little bit more experience in that level of cold weather. So that's probably, you're probably right. It is the Bills.
Yep. I personally think it's the Bills as well, and I think that the Bills, um, I think the Bills are the better team overall, at this point in the season. But I do think, if it makes sense, I think the Buffalo Bills are the better team, but I think Baltimore has the better players. Does that make sense?
Well,
Yeah,
I think
individual over collective. Yeah,
Yeah.
One thing that works for the Bills for sure too is the like everyone talked about early in the season that they didn't have a lot of weapons, but Josh Allen throws to more players than anybody else in the NFL.
Yeah,
It's
that's
nuts.
exactly why I think like the team works better, because like he throws to literally anyone, and
Yeah.
they all make plays. They all can make plays. Like, if you look at the outside, they have Keon Coleman, who they drafted this year. They have Mari Cooper. They have Shakur, Khalil Shakur, who's been an unbelievable wide receiver, who's actually flourished more since Stephon Diggs left, and actually became a top tier wide receiver in my opinion. But the Bills, man, like their defense is also really good up front. Like, I love Ed Oliver, man. Like, he is so good in the front seven. But
Beyond Dawkins,
yeah,
beast too.
Dawkins as well. And then I
Is he
forget.
gonna play though? I thought Dawkins like went down. He left for a bit. I don't know if he came back.
Oh, I'm not sure. I haven't been following the injury report this week so far, really, with this game. But
yeah, he's a
that
monster.
would be a huge loss.
They
Obviously.
they also added their veteran presence of is it Matt Milano back in the like linebacker position. Man, he is so good across the middle. And like, you just got to think like the team overall is so much better not so much better, I shouldn't say that, but better as a team than what Baltimore is. I think Baltimore has the better individuals, and if we're gonna know like immediately how this game is gonna go, because if you remember in week 4, Derrick Henry got like an 87-yard run off the hop. If he gets that off the hop again, yeah, you're probably right. The Baltimore Ravens run away with this thing because they're not gonna be able to stop him on defense, or on Buffalo won't be able to stop them. But if they're able to shut down the run, man, I don't like this for the Ravens at all. Like, I don't. I think the Bills take this.
Damn, guys. That's both very fair. I was trying, like, I was thinking when Brandon was speaking that I think the Ravens have it, and then you make some good points too, Justin, on your side. I think what it ends up coming down to it is I think the hungrier dog will run faster. And you're like, which one's hungrier? I think the pressure is more on Lamar Jackson in this game. I do think the way that the Bills have been playing this season and the fact that it was supposed to be what people referred to it as a retool this year, losing Diggs and just kind of losing Gabe Davis. And who do they have, weapon wise? I think the way that Josh Allen has performed this season has been admirable, and MVP aside, because this is the MVP bowl, who knows how this turns out. But all of that to say, I do think Lamar
It's
Jackson
not the
has more
MVP
pressure.
bowl. We already know who won the MVP.
Not necessarily.
Yeah,
But all that to say,
all the votes went to Lamar. Like he wins, he's won the he won the AP
I
poll.
think,
He absolutely killed Josh Allen in the AP poll. First team All Pro.
which, yes,
Don't tell me he's not MVP now. Like
I don't love
that's
it.
already been decided.
I don't love it, but that's kind of what people were spinning this narrative as the fact that it was the top 2 point getters, whether we know or whether we don't know. It was the two throughout the whole season that were vying for the MVP. I still think Lamar Jackson is the hungrier dog, and I think the pressure is on him more than it is Josh Allen, even though maybe as a whole, Buffalo has a little bit more pressure. So I do think the Baltimore Ravens take it in a very close matchup. Ultimately, I just hope that this game is good, and I think that we're in for an
I
absolute
think we are
classic
in
either way.
for an absolute classic.
Be watching
Yeah,
this one on
let's
NFL
hope.
films for the next 30 years, probably. Just like
Exactly.
look at that game
Let's
in
hope.
2025. And Josh Allen, Lamar, it's gonna be great.
Dueling it out. Amazing. So good football stuff, good football takes, boys. We'll transition over to taking a second look. For those of you that don't know, this is where we take a second look at a team, league, player, situation, event, and kind of give our take on it. So, Justin, let's go over to you. Who are you taking a second look at this week?
Listen, I'm taking a second look at this kid in the Western Hockey League. Young kid. I don't know if you guys even know who this kid is. Landon DuPont. Have you
Yep.
guys heard of him?
I'm going to say
15,
15.
15 years old, was um exceptional status in the WHL draft. Uh, but in his rookie season as a defenseman, has 43 points in 37 games. This kid is unbelievable. He's 27 or 2027 draft eligible. Probably going to be the first overall pick. He's 5'11 right now at 15. He's probably going to go to 6'2, 6'3. Yeah, this kid's unbelievable, man. Like he is catching my eye, and he's only 15 years old, and he's being one of the best defensemen in the WHL already.
Yeah, that's a fair one. I'm going to try and keep an eye on him. I heard about him a while back, but sprinkles throughout the past couple of weeks in terms of his performance. So exciting stuff. Brandon, who do you have?
Yeah, that's a good one, Justin. I'm not as familiar with Mr. DuPont. I will have to keep an eye on him as he gets, a little older and gets closer to draft eligibility. That's where I start to pay attention. But for me, it's I'm sticking with football, and I'm taking a second look at Tom Brady and the Oakland Raiders,
Wow.
and the kind of interesting scenario playing out in regards to their head coaching search. First, I'm sure everybody's aware that the legendary Pats coach Bill Belichick, now down in North Carolina, going to be heading that football program there. But there were some reports recently after the Raiders took a little bit of extra time to eventually fire Antonio Pierce, their head coach of this season. They decided that, hey, we're going to take a shot. Tom Brady, you know that Bill Belichick guy. And he said, yeah, I think I do. So they took their shot and they missed because Tom Brady did not get, at least at this point, has not gotten Bill Belichick to go back on his word and join the Oakland Raiders after signing with the North Carolina Tar Heels there.
He's not going to get him. He's not going to get him.
No, he's not. And that's why my second look is there are rumors coming out more yesterday that the Raiders have turned and are closer than some other teams to hiring Ben Johnson, Lions offensive coordinator. And now I think that would be a fantastic choice for them. The one thing that they are missing, but I'm not scared of this because they have Tom Brady, not necessarily saying that he's going to go down and play quarterback, but they don't have a quarterback. And I think that's one thing that they will need, obviously, to have success in a Ben Johnson-led offense.
Can you imagine Brady? Brady playing.
I will do this myself.
So Brady's now playing. He's part owner, and then he's broadcasting. Yeah, so I can see that the defense is gonna do a nickel run here. We're gonna have to drop back into coverage. I'm picking up the blitz, but I don't know what's actually gonna happen here. But anyway, I gotta put the mic down. I gotta actually call the snap now. Sounds good. and then just goes and snaps. That would be crazy.
Right.
Tom Brady.
Trailblazer.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I'm just excited about the Raiders actually making some legitimately smart choices here, trying to go after, the Belichick thing. Whether or not you think that's smart, that's another thing. I don't think they even viewed that as too serious. As a good, PR, good optics to try to go after a guy that had so much success with Tom Brady. But the if they are able to bring in a guy like Ben Johnson, who is, I'd say, probably the most coveted, if not one of the top 3 most coveted. Obviously, Vrabel was one of those, and he's gone to the Patriots now. So, and you've got the other Lions coordinator looking for a job as well, potentially. Yeah. So I think that would be a legitimately smart decision by the Oakland Raiders, and I think that would be spearheaded by Tom Brady, and I think it's just a glimpse into what we could see in the future with the Raiders potentially, at some point in the future coming back to fruition and being another, a team that could potentially build a winner, because we haven't seen that franchise, show up in a big way in a long time. So I'm excited and taking a second look at the Oakland Raiders there, or Las Vegas Raiders. What am I talking about now? Las Vegas Raiders.
Hey, listen. Let's give Oakland love. They've lost like what 3 teams in 5 years, something crazy like that. So give
Keep
them
in
a
spirit.
shout out. Let's. I will take a second look. I'm going to take a second look this week when crossing the street or in a vehicular vehicle. Especially if I'm an NHL player, I'm going to look both ways and take a second look. What is going on in the NHL? You have Michael Bunting first Sunday, who apparently got into a minor car accident on his way to PPG Paints Arena, from my understanding, when the Lightning were heading to Pittsburgh. He was out, did not play against Tampa Bay. 2 days later, we get a report that Emil Heineman of the Montreal Canadiens was involved in an accident as a pedestrian when crossing the street in Salt Lake City. He's out 3 to 4 weeks. A weird situation there in that I think he was hit, but then when the police arrived on scene, like it was like 3 p.m. or something like that, there was no one there. And eventually a local business had information about the crash. They went to the business. They found out team doctors had finally gotten a hold of Heineman, and he was being evaluated. It's nothing major, but obviously enough to put him out 3 to 4 weeks. I think it was classified as an upper body injury. Not to make light of these situations. Obviously, they're all okay, so it's not a bad thing, but back to back from Sunday to Tuesday, that's a really weird scenario to observe, especially both NHL players getting injured from getting hit. It's one of those things where you feel like these athletes, I think about this way more than the average person. They're traveling all the time. You're always moving around, and athletes, like, it's very rare to hear them get hurt or miss games because of things outside of either like a practice or an NHL game. And you think about like walking around your own apartment, your own house, like stubbing your toe, falling over, like stuff like this never really gets reported. Now, these are professional athletes, but it's still so weird to see situations like this that actually have an effect on statuses for games. So hopefully both Bunting and Heineman are okay. It's not to make light of it, but it's just a really weird 3 days where you get 2 players injured based on car accidents.
Could
so
you imagine?
Glad they are both fine.
Could you imagine if the Leafs, Austin Matthews missed more time and they like kept on saying it's his back, and then he came out and was like, "Yeah, I actually just stubbed my toe really bad, man. It was so
It's
bad.
really in pain.
It's so
Had
so
to
much
travel to
in pain."
Germany and see a podiatrist. Would have been
That'd be,
insane.
that'd be
Crazy
crazy.
stuff. Real quick, we had some notes on the Jays, but we'll kind of blow past them. Just real quick question about the Jays. Do we realistically think that they're going to land Roki Sasaki? What are the chances here?
No.
Oh,
No. He's going to the Padres, I think, personally. Like if we had Kikuchi here, maybe there's a better chance, only because, it seems like one of the things that's drawing him to a team is the fact of
Familiar faces.
yeah, familiar faces that he's going to be able to see, like Yu Darvish in San Diego, and then you have Shohei Ohtani and Yamamoto in LA. And the Blue Jays, in my opinion, they don't have anyone right now. They had Kikuchi, who would have been a great thing, or a great person to talk to and able to pitch him on why to come here. Obviously that was a great trade they made for Kikuchi. I'm not saying they shouldn't have traded Kikuchi, but I just mean, like, in this scenario, I don't think you have anything to go really and pitch him well. The only thing that they have is the fact like of the country again, like, oh, you can play for the country. Like that's the whole thing about Japan too. Like you can play for the country. Like that's the difference, but I think they're gonna lose out to San Diego in my opinion.
So I'll just counter by saying, and I know we'll move on, but I'll counter by saying Ben Nicholson Smith had a great article on this a few weeks ago of like how to pitch Roki Sasaki. This was way before he was even a finalist with the Padres or the Jays were finalists for him with the Padres and Dodgers. Is two big things that the Jays have. Obviously, they have Pete Walker. I mean, from development perspective, Roki Sasaki has noted that a big reason he wants to pick a team is because he wants to know that obviously the team is successful and is moving in the right direction, but also has pitching development. And I think Pete Walker's done a great job, former pitcher, at developing pitchers here. And I think hopefully that can kind of draw him in, and hopefully he was used for their pitch. And then you mentioned obviously the pitching for like playing for an entire country. That's big. They don't really have familiar faces other than Yusei Kikuchi and utilizing his like former you can talk to Kikuchi and ask how his time with the Jays were. But the idea of the media. Now I know Toronto media in general can be pretty hectic, mainly with the Maple Leafs. But I know that the reason when he left Japan, Sasaki wasn't really viewed very highly in the media. And so I think he was a little upset with how he's covered. So I think and LA is going to get a lot more media. I don't know how San Diego is. Maybe they're favored. But in Toronto, I do think he's going to be a little under the radar in terms of the fact that that the Leafs take the narrative, even though in the offseason, sometimes
Also,
the Jays are a little
you
higher.
just
I
brought
don't
up
know.
you brought up a good point about pitching. I just wanted to bring up a quick stat about LA pitchers and development. Walker Bueller's had Tommy John surgery twice. Dustin May's had Tommy John surgery twice, and Tony Glazen's
Mm-hmm.
had Tommy John surgery in pitcher development from the Los Angeles Dodgers. There's also a couple more like Kyle Kurt, River Ryan, and Emmett Sheeran, that have all had Tommy John surgeries in the Dodgers development of their pitchers, which if you're Sasaki, I think you have to look at and say, like, the history of this is obviously not the best as other places. So that might be an up for the Jays. Good point, Alex.
Yeah, we'll see. Quickly, we'll finish with our last segment here, cheering from the press box. Justin, let's go to you for this one first. Who are you cheering from the press box for
All
this
right.
week?
We talked about it earlier. Got to do it. Got to cheer for them. The Washington Commanders, first playoff
Mm.
win in 20 years. You got to feel good. That's a feel good story for them. Like you said, 848 goals for Ovian between those two things. A Stanley Cup. I gotta feel good for them. Maybe a curse was lifted after the team was sold by Dan Snyder. That might be the case here. But I think the Commanders are in a new era, and I'm just super excited to see what they can actually do this weekend. So I'm cheering for them, in the press box this week.
I like it. Good choice. Brandon.
I love it as well, Justin. Good choice. For me, I'm sticking local. And it's a team we have not talked about very much since we started this podcast, and that is the Toronto Raptors, guys. We had the Raptors beat the Celtics at home last night,
Yeah.
part of a huge 2-game winning streak we are now on, where we've
Three out of
beaten
the last 19.
beaten
Woo!
some recent champions. We had the Warriors the other night, and then we had the Celtics. The most recent NBA champions. We beat them at home last night. And I'm starting to see where this team is going. Scotty Barnes, we've kind of known he's a legitimate all-star star type player that can lead a team in terms of be the number one option. Also has great handles with the basketball as well. So I'd love to see that he's starting to pick up that leadership. And now that we have some of those healthy pieces around him, RJ's playing great. Pirtle is playing fantastic. I expect him to stick around as well. And then you've got some other guys, of course, off the bench and in the starting lineup, Grady Dick and Emmanuel Quickly. They're great guards as well, and they're starting to put it all together as a unit. So I'm really liking what Darko Rakovic is doing, the head coach there. And even though we're not expecting this team to make the playoffs or even to play in this year, I just love that they continue to play competitive against good teams. And even though they have some some lulls where they lose some pretty bad games. It's just exciting to see them, continuing to still put their best foot forward and win some games against some really good competition. So I was excited to see that this week.
I'm glad you highlighted them. They deserved love. Like the Raptors haven't gotten a lot of it this year. 2-game win streak against some decent opponents. That's a good shout out, Brandon.
Yeah.
Just quickly here, I'm sticking with basketball, even though they haven't set foot on a court yet and won't until 2026. I'm cheering for the Toronto Tempo. Their merchandise dropped on Tuesday, Jan 5th, 14th. Fire. Some of the stuff that I saw, I was going through the merch. It's awesome. I was not really on board with the name or the color scheme when it first came out, but some of the merchandise they put together, the hats, the shirts, I will be buying. I tried to go to Peace Collective at Union Station. It was closed. I think yesterday, like they had someone off for lunch and I was like, why? But all that to say, I'm going to go try and buy some gear as soon as possible. Hopefully maybe we'd love to get a discount code through the pod. Maybe somebody sponsors us. It's not going to happen, but hey, we'll use some funds there. Yeah, go ahead.
Just quickly before we wrap up here, the Stadium Series jerseys just dropped for Detroit and Columbus. Columbus looks absolutely fire, man. They absolutely killed this jersey. I don't, like, you probably can't see it through this, but they absolutely killed it for Columbus. And
I like that.
Finally, John Tavares is out for a week.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm cheering for the Leafs to get Tavares back. Lower body injury, as if the power play couldn't get any worse. He got injured during a power play drill in practice. So how is the power play hurting the Leafs when they're not even playing games? I don't know.
Yeah, it was
crazy stuff.
It was a bit of a scary scene there yesterday at practice. He got up pretty gingerly. Thankfully, he was able to skate off on his own, which I think most people led to believe it wasn't like something too serious. But hopefully, they get him back as soon as possible, and they'll be ready to push for the playoffs. We'll be around 4 Nations, I guess.
Push for the playoffs, man. They're first place in the Atlantic Division. Don't even
but if you've been watching, they haven't been playing well. They need to push their play.
They're on a 3-game slump. They're on a 3-game slump. It's not
okay. Who are you, Willie Nylander? Sound like
I'm saying it's
not a big deal.
Slump. Don't overreact. If it's a 7-game slump, then start overreacting.
Yeah, you have a 3-game slump in the playoffs, and you're done. You're out, bro. You're going home. Done. If you get, you got to play well every game, and they got to be serious about it. That's what it comes down to.
That's it. Okay. Maybe Steven Lorentz fills Tavares' power play spot. He was on the top line for a game. We'll see. All good. Good episode, boys. For Brandon Brown, Justin Arenburg, Alex Mandarino, and producer Sarah Matt. Let's have it. Let's end this off on a high note. Episode 5, Second Look Sports. Thank you for listening. Subscribe, listen everywhere. Catch you later.